record to the cloud.
I'm recording to the cloud.
Awesome. All right. You have a lovely evening, unless you'd like me to hang out longer.
You're always welcome to hang out longer, but if you want to go and have some quiet time and get off duty, that's
Eh,
fine too.
Thanks so much. You all have a lovely evening.
Okay, you too. So, welcome everybody to the Alternative Voting Methods Statewide Task Force for December 2025. Here's the agenda for today. We actually have a guest speaker to talk about the approval voting vacancy election. The one person was recommended and he deferred to another person because he promised his family he wouldn't talk about the Utah election in the evenings for this week. He's taking a break. Um, and then we have some updates on enabling legislation for proportional ranked voting for here in Colorado. And then Greenbelt, Maryland's advisory referendum on proportional ranked voting, we did not get to last time. So both that and the Utah Senate one got short shrift last time. So we're going to talk about them more this time. Just a sad note that Senator Faith Winter died in a car crash the day before Thanksgiving. And she was a prime sponsor of the enabling legislation for single winner ranked voting. So there was a huge event at the Capitol in memory of her, and we're dedicating this meeting to her. So, um, you all agreed to these meeting norms, so you don't need to read this slide, but it's there to remind you. Here are the minutes from the last meeting. We had 17 attendees. We had 3 guest speakers talk about the Fort Collins instant runoff voting election that they had, their first one ever. It seemed well received. And Clayton King and Stacy Frank did an exit poll as part of the Alliance for Competitive Elections. You can see those results if you go to competitiveelections.org / 2025 hyphen exit hyphen poll. So they're basically what they said during our meeting last time, but now they're up in official report form. And then we talked about proportional ranked voting and legislation for that, and that's about it for the meeting. So the next thing is to do introductions, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other. And I'm happy to go first. My name is Celeste Landry, and I've been the facilitator of this meeting since the beginning, and maybe it's time for somebody else to be a facilitator of it. And I live in Boulder County, and Boulder County is quite active in the whole voting methods world. Deborah, will you go next and will you call on people after?
Sure.
That would be great.
I'm Deborah Lycan. I live in Durango, and I've been attending these meetings for some time, getting educated, and I've joined a book club here for the Durango League of Women Voters, where people are interested in learning more about proportional representation. And we're going to be discussing a white paper put out by the AAAS, where people seemed really interested in whether we could do some more education of people in the Durango, La Plata County. Okay, Pat.
Okay, hi, I'm Pat Venturo. I'm part of the Boulder League also, and been on the voting methods team for a number of years, and really hoping we can move toward proportional representation.
Great.
How about Barb Gillick?
Hi. This is my first meeting, so I'm part of the Arapahoe County and Douglas County chapter group. And I just joined last month in November. So very passionate about voting and voting rights, and just wanted to join this just to see what you all were up to and to learn.
Great, thank you. Chris Baum?
My mouth is full, but I'm
Yeah, sorry.
an approval voting candidate, advocate, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Also a candidate, but
Okay, Pearl-Ann Zillarni?
Hi, I'm Pearl-Ann Zillarni. This is my first meeting. I'm with League of Women Voters of Denver, and we're considering trying to get a ranked choice voting initiative on the ballot next year.
Oh, great. David Ernst?
Hi, everybody. I was involved. I helped to run this Utah approval voting vote that just concluded this past weekend. I'm actually based in California. This was a Utah vote. Here we are in Colorado. It's nice to connect with people across the country. I've been working for the last 10 years, specifically on digital democracy, but I do a lot of overlapping work on alternative voting methods. I've collaborated with a lot of different groups in the space. Excited to share more about it. Nice
Great,
to meet you all.
thanks.
And David is our guest speaker today, so we'll hear more from David.
Thank you. Mark Bornhorst?
Hi, Mark Bonhorst. I'm from Minneapolis. I just put something in the chat, which I'll be talking about in a minute. There was a event on December 9th that the League of Women Voters of US was present at, and the League of Women Voters of Deerfield, Illinois got an award for the work they've been doing on replacing the Electoral College, the 50-year moonshot. So I could report a little bit about that.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Mark Parsons?
Hi, yeah, I'm Mark Parsons. I'm also with the Boulder League on the voting methods team with Celeste and Pat, advocate of proportional representation.
Okay, great. Let's see, Lori Stevens?
Hi, I'm Lori Stevens. I am a member of the Boulder League, although I live in Broomfield, and I'm on the Broomfield Canvas Board, which is what initiated my interest in all of this. And I have a particular interest in auditing, but I really want to understand how proportional and ranked choice voting influences auditing. So I'm here mostly to learn.
Great, thanks. And Betsy?
Hi, Betsy McBride calling from Boise, Idaho. And we had ranked choice voting on the ballot last year. So we have some materials that I'll send to Pearl-Ann that might be useful for the Denver League.
Great, thanks, Betsy. All right, back to you, Celeste.
Okay, I'm updating one of the slides for today's talk because Lori, we're going to have an event in Longmont on proportional representation, and maybe you can join us.
Yeah,
okay.
I saw that. I think I'm right. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, let me go back to sharing
Well,
the screen.
Neil just popped in if he wants
Great.
to introduce himself.
And Lori, it's nice to see your face. I've exchanged a couple emails with you, so yeah. Neil, go ahead.
Hi, this is Neil McBurnett, and I have been interested in voting methods for, I don't know, 3 decades or so, and just commented with Lori on rulemaking in Colorado about ranked voting, and love election integrity and audits.
And we'll talk a little bit more about all that. So yeah, okay. Let me find how to share my screen again.
Here, let me make sure you can do it.
I can. Okay, do you see the meeting introduction slide?
No. Yes.
And now it says Voting Methods League, LWV Voting Methods News.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the rulemaking hearing that Neil and Lori were talking about. And first of all, David, are you in a big rush? Or can we do some announcements
All good.
first? All good.
Okay.
Okay, great. There was a rulemaking hearing on rules for multi-county instant runoff voting elections. So, instant runoff voting is a single winner form of ranked voting. And we and RCV for Colorado, in separate comments, asked for the rules to be expanded to include single transferable vote or proportional ranked voting. That's the other method that's authorized in Colorado statute. So here is a ranked voting ballot. I think everybody is probably familiar with this, but you pick your first choice, and that's the most important one. That's the one that will definitely get counted. Your others might not get counted. But then there's a tabulation method. The tabulation method is different for the single winner versus the multi-winner version. And then Utah uses another kind that's, I call a mutant multi-winner version because it's not proportional. So that's my bias coming through. And we happy to talk about that if you all want to. But then the other thing is the League of Women Voters is having an event on January 14th in Longmont at 7
Want me to
o'clock.
want me to share my screen? I got it up on my.
Sure,
Okay, so you got to stop sharing yours.
I did.
Can you see it, everybody?
There it is. So you can just go to lwvbc.org and go to upcoming events on that page and register for the event. If you don't register and there's room, you're welcome to come. It's only in person, but the good news is that Jen Clellan, who's leading this presentation, conversation, and interactive election, will be at our January meeting on January 26th. So you can see her there. Shall I go back to sharing now my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So let's see if I'm doing this right. Okay. There we go. Okay.
Yep.
Good. And here's a graphic showing what proportional representation is. If the vote is split 40% for people of one group, it could be a party, it could be whatever way the election is organized. So if it's a partisan election, it would probably be party is how you would measure it. But if it's a nonpartisan election, it could be, renters versus people who own houses. It could be by racial group. It could be by ideology. It could be whatever the electorate thinks is important should be reflected proportionally. So thanks to Pat, who did a lot of the work on this graphic. Okay, some national voting methods news. There is a Ranked Choice Voting Act that was reintroduced in Congress, and it would institute single winner instant runoff voting, which is always a winner-take-all form of voting. It's not calling for the multi-winner proportional ranked voting, and it would be for all primary and general elections for the U.S. House and Senate. There's no bill number yet. Jamie Raskin is the main sponsor of that bill. He does a lot of elections things. And then, Mark, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, thanks. So on December 9th, there was a Zoom event hosted by Making Every Vote Count Foundation, which is a group I started working with in 2018, 2019, that's been working on various aspects of presidential election reform ever since and is still in the game. And they started off the event with an award to the League of Women Voters Illinois Deerfield chapter, which has been very active in the league's effort, its 50-year moonshot effort to reform the presidential election system. So this is the first time I've ever seen anything about what's really going on in that moonshot effort. But in the course of that presentation, it turns out this league has a presidential election committee, which has 120 members from 20 states. So this seems to be at least one place where the action is at. And I joined that committee. I told them I joined and I haven't heard back from them, but I assume I've joined that committee. The other thing is both by making every vote count and in the National League of Women Voters effort, I think there are opportunities for this committee's work to be influential or helpful. Because the second half of that Zoom meeting was a discussion from three eminent academics about what's going on. And one of the issues that making every vote count is worrying about is what kind of election system would you use if you got rid of the electoral college in order to reflect the will of the people. And I had suggested several of these people, 7 years ago, that approval voting might make sense. So that's that's something that I think they would be open to looking at. I don't know whether the National League of Women Voters effort is ready to take on that issue. They may just be publicizing general stuff about the Electoral College and not getting down into the weeds, the way making every vote count seems to want to do. But either way, I think it's valuable to interact both with the national effort and with making every vote count to share the wisdom that this group has about voting systems, particularly about approval voting. So there's a video of the event. It's in the chat. I put it in the chat 5 or 10 minutes ago. It's got a password, and members of this committee are authorized to look at it. They didn't want super wide distribution, but they said, yeah, it's fine for this committee to look at it.
Mark gave us a good shout out to the group. So are they talking about what is happening in Maine with their use of instant runoff voting for their presidential election?
No, not that I've heard. I mean, their focus is on sometime in the next 50 years, we're going to change the electoral college system.
And is it based on popular vote?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Any questions for Mark?
So I would love to, I see that this is not proportional for like the parallel, well, it's not a parallel bill. There's another bill that says, let's do the House with proportional voting.
Right.
I wonder why it would make sense to
So
propose
everybody, Neil is talking about the Ranked Choice Voting Act now. He's not talking about what Mark was talking about. So we're changing gears here. Okay.
Okay. What do we know about whoever it is that's behind the Ranked Choice Voting Act, and wouldn't PRV be better?
It is so we'll see later in the slides that the National League prefers proportional representation for elected bodies. So we, as a league, should be supporting the U.S. Fair Representation Act over the Ranked Choice Voting Act. You could argue that maybe the Ranked Choice Voting Act is better than what we have now, and we should do that. But I understand where you're coming from, Neil. I'm not a member of Congress, but
yeah.
Okay. Is it did your, I don't know how to answer your question, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, so you've made the point that I would like to also try to make, and but if we don't have anybody that we have influence with that's pushing it, maybe we don't know how to unpush it.
It has about, right now, I think it has about as many co-sponsors as the U.S. Fair Representation Act. Maybe one or two more there. I haven't counted the numbers, but it doesn't have a bill number yet. So, I mean, I'm basing this on, oh, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm basing this on a previous Ranked Choice Voting Act list of sponsors. Okay. Yeah, I was looking for information about it, but yes, it does not yet have a bill. So let's move on to the next announcement. Those star voting is a kind of voting that uses this ballot where you score the candidates from 0, no support, to 5, maximum support. You give each candidate 1 score. And then the top 2 scorers go on to the runoff. So if Alba Abar and Bill Boyd get the top 2 scores overall over all the ballots, this ballot would go to Alba Abar. The vote in the runoff would go to Alba Abar. Suppose Cora Carr and Do Dien were in the runoff. This ballot would go to the higher scoring candidate. So the 1 vote in the runoff would go to Do Dien. So it's by score in the summation round. And then in the runoff, each ballot counts for 1 vote, and it goes to the higher scoring of the 2 finalists. So this is amazing, happy news. Star voting was used to fill a public municipal office. It's the first time. And on December 1st, Oregon's oldest city used star voting. And in the star voting round 1, Joshua Conklin and Mike Brosius they tied for the top score, for the total score. So it's okay to have a tie as long as there are 2 of them. You don't have to have a tiebreaker. You just take the top 2 people and they go to the runoff. And then you look at the individual ballots, and Joshua Conklin got more votes and it was only the city council that did this election. The city council gets to fill the vacancy. So there weren't very many voters in this election, but it had consequences. It's filling a government seat. So after Joshua Conklin won the star voting election, then they made a motion to appoint Joshua Conklin to the seat, and that passed unanimously. So maybe you could argue that it was the final motion that mattered, but they definitely used star voting to end up with that motion to have Joshua Conklin be the new city council member. So there's the article there if people are interested, or you could probably just Google star voting Astoria. Okay. Some upcoming events. Neil is the League of Women Voters representative on the Bipartisan Election Advisory Commission. They're meeting this Friday at 10 a.m. in Zoom and in person at the Secretary of State's office. They're going to talk about the 2025 coordinated election, but afterwards there's going to be time for the public to comment. So the public may do that. I may be one of those, the public. June, there is the LWVUS convention in Columbus, Ohio. And also, I mentioned before the January 14th event on proportional representation in Longmont. But if you can't make that, you can come to our next meeting, January 26th, where Jen will do a redux of that proportional ranked voting election, except with a different electorate, the people who come to this meeting. And register on the event calendar like you did this time. Here is our national position. You can see we've highlighted the part about.
I just put my hand up.
Oh, yes.
And back to the LOVUS. So this would probably be a good time if we have any interest in affecting the program to start talking about it, or maybe we're already late to do that. But I remember that we were both delegates and some others delegates at the last convention, and there was an election for, if I remember correctly, the nominating committee, and there ended up being more than one slot, and they ended up using this. I remember not, there was a lot of confusion about the process, and a lot of us thought there ought to be a way to use a proportional voting method when you have that unusual situation. Anyway, I just wonder if anyone's thinking about doing anything for that meeting, proposing study sessions or bylaw amendments, or trying to fix the voting methods or anything like that.
I believe Deb McDonough is working on that. And she's from Maine, although she grew up in Longmont. And one of the Maine people got elected to that nominating committee. So do you know Deb McDonough? Do you want to get in touch with her, or shall I introduce you?
I've known Deb for many years, so
Okay.
Good info.
Okay. Yeah, and last time, 2 years ago, the State League suggested a workshop on the affirmative right to vote and universal, quote, mandatory voting. So those are two different ideas. Affirmative right to vote, like put it in our Constitution. We're talking about perhaps doing an add-on to the Colorado Voting Rights Act and trying to put an affirmative right to vote in the Colorado Constitution. And then separately, it would be great for the league to discuss. No obligation here, but let's get ourselves up to speed on what it means to have universal voting. I mean, there's some countries that have universal voting, but only until you're age 70 or something like that. There are other ones like Australia that expect you to do it all the time. I actually know somebody whose brother lives in Australia and he's never voted, but that's because he's never registered to vote. So if you don't register, then I guess they don't go after you. Anyway, anybody interested in talking about that, contact me. I'm always happy to talk about elections and voting. Okay. I said this was the National League position. We worked hard to get this adopted in 2020. We took out some bad language that would have caused some problems down the road. So that was a victory, although it's always a weird victory if you take something out to make it better. But yeah. Okay. So David, the first thing on the agenda, the regular agenda, is the approval voting vacancy committee in Utah. I have some slides. We could look at those. You could talk about them, or I could talk about them. You could chime in. You could do your own thing. What's your preference?
I'm not familiar with their slides, but if you have prepared remarks, that's great. I have some prepared notes as well, but fine with whatever is easier for you.
Okay, so some background. Utah State Senator Daniel Thatcher from Senate District 11 announced a month or two ago that he would not seek re-election, or maybe it was earlier than that. And anyway, then he planned to resign before the end of the year. And he had been a Republican, but early this year he changed to the Forward Party. That meant the Forward Party got to choose Senator Thatcher's replacement in a midterm replacement process. And there are a lot of problems with the typical replacement. Usually it's a few dozen people, maybe 100, who get to fill a seat which has tens of thousands of constituents. And there are way too many Utah and Colorado legislators who've gotten their seats this way from a small group. Coloradans have complained a lot about the vacancy committee process. I even wrote a guest opinion myself in the Colorado Sun, not as a member of the league, just proposing 2 ways to cut down on the number of vacancy committees. And, of course, because Faith Winter died last month, there will be a vacancy committee to fill her vacant seat. And nobody's going to complain, I think, about that kind of vacancy committee. It's the ones where sitting legislator gets reelected, resigns a month later, announces who he wants to fill his seat and who he wants to fill the seat of that legislator who moves over to the Senate, say. And this has happened in Colorado, and it's frankly, I think it's embarrassing for Colorado. So Utah's forward party plan was great, fabulous. Anybody who met the qualifications, they were old enough, they lived in the district, they'd been a registered voter, they could run for the seat. They had to affiliate with the Forward Party, and then the Forward Party took all those applications and they picked 5 candidates that they said were best aligned with the goals of the Forward Party. And then every registered voter in Senate District 11 got to vote in the vacancy election. And David, you probably don't know this, but we had a vacancy quote election in Colorado in El Paso County District 5, where only Republicans were allowed to run and only Republicans and unaffiliateds were allowed to vote in it. And I think this is the first time that I've heard of in the United States where you're not letting everybody vote who is going to be a constituent for the elected official. And it's run by the government, right? I mean, this vacancy, you can see the title is Little D Democratic, right? It's not Democratic Party. It's just Little D Democratic Vacancy Committee because everybody got to vote. The vacancy election in El Paso County was not Little D Democratic at all. And then a wonderful thing is that they had 5 candidates, and so you don't want to have vote splitting, and so they used approval voting. And Dave will talk to us a bit about that. This is what an approval voting ballot looks like. It is so simple. You just, instead of choose one, you can still choose one, or you can choose 2, you can choose 3, you can choose them all, although that won't make a difference in the election, except it'll show that you turned out. And then the most votes win. So there's a great 12-minute video. I recommend people watch it, talking about their plans to fill the vacancy. And then you can go to 11chooses.com and utahapproves.org for more info. Here's the slide with your name on it, David. And then I have a slide with the results, but maybe you want to talk about that?
Sure
Do you
thing.
want to,
Thank
do
you.
you want to share your screen, or what do you
Sure.
want?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I have a lot of fun things to share as well.
We're so happy to have you here. And
Likewise.
it looks like Matthew is here. Matthew, you're from Wyoming and you've been to our meeting before. Welcome.
Yep, I'm on the league's voting methods team.
Wonderful. We've got Idaho, Minnesota, Wyoming, California/Utah. Okay.
So this was a very historic election for a whole bunch of reasons. The open part, I would think of it as a trifecta. There were 3 organizations that helped put it on. Why don't I pull up to actually illustrate that a little bit better? This is how we privately set up this page, explaining it to everybody. And it was a partnership between these 3 organizations, the local Forward Party of Utah, the Center for Election Science, which is if you're not familiar with them, they do fantastic work around approval voting, advocacy work. And then the organization that I help lead called Civ, we're very focused on the digital voting side of things, although we love all these other things as well. But there's hard problems for digital voting that we focus on trying to make easy. And so all 3 of these parts were really historic. Like you're talking about having the party primary, the replacement being open to everybody. I mentioned this in the chat, but just to say it again out loud, I have been told that 25% of the state legislature got there through appointments. And
Betsy has her hand up.
yeah.
Is that okay to have people
Yeah,
jump
please.
in? Okay.
Please. It's much more interactive that way.
David, could you just say in the elevator 2 sentences what the Forward Party believes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say their one and major party platform is democracy reform. Our current democratic systems are struggling. They're very focused on alternative voting methods and all sorts of other ideas. The Forward Party is most famously known through its founder, Andrew Yang, who was a 2020 presidential candidate. At the time, he was most famous for advocating for universal basic income, although that is not a position of the Forward Party. That I am not a representative of the Forward Party officially. I can't speak to that exactly, but but many of the members there, it's like he kind of helped foster it and brought a lot of attention. It was also co-founded with the former Republican governor of New
Christine
Jersey.
Todd Whitman.
Yeah. So it is kind of has this bipartisanship, or there's this term that I really love, transpartisan, going across parties, not just being limited to two parties, to built into its blood. So yeah, I've gotten to work with a lot of Forward Party members over the years, and every last one of them I really enjoy. I think they would be very well appreciated in this group as well.
David, I
And
have a question about the Forward Party.
yeah,
If you look at their platform, they talk a lot about ranked choice voting.
yeah.
So how did they change over to approval voting for this election? Do you know that history, or did you just get on
Yeah.
board later?
Yeah, it was a little bit touch and go, to be honest. So another distinct point I want to add is that there is a very light touch connection between the National Forward Party and the state chapters. And so the state chapters have similar values and interests, but different priorities. And so it just so happens that the Utah Forward Party happened to be co-founded by also the co-founder of an organization known as Utah Approves. And so in the Utah Forward Party's charter, so I have been told, they explicitly say they will use approval voting for all of their party chair positions, treasury positions, things like that. And so they've been doing this. They officially became a party about 3 years ago, something like that. And so they've been doing this for a long time. So there's a lot of interest in approval voting. With that said, for this particular election, though, it was not 100% that it was going to be an approval voting election. There was a good amount of talk, kind of close to before the election actually started, of it being a ranked choice ballot, of which tallying method was still kind of up in the air, and then also potentially a star ballot. There was a good amount of interest in that as well. One kind of interesting consideration that I had never heard before, and I've been doing this sort of stuff for a while now, over a decade, is they had this idea that they weren't sure how many candidates they were going to get. And because they had a lot of flexibility, they had this idea that if they got three or fewer candidates, then maybe a ranked choice ballot made more sense. And if they had more than three candidates, four or five, or they ended up getting 8 applicants, then they would go with either approval or star. And so that's what ended up happening.
So I actually ran in a vacancy committee, and there were 6 candidates. And what they did was they used approval voting in the first round. And in Colorado, you have to what you do is you keep running the election, and then the lowest voter, if nobody gets 50+%, the lowest candidate is dropped, and then you run the election again. But in this case, what they did was the first round, they did approval voting, and I got 48% approval voting, which is pretty good, And I tied with another person, but that we were in the bottom 3. Somebody else got like 6%. Anyway, so we were dropped out, and then they did round by round. Whoever got if somebody got over 50%, then they won, but they had to do 2 more rounds, and eventually somebody won. So I was so pleased that they did that, because a little while later they had another vacancy committee, and that vacancy committee, you only got to vote for one. and it was a blowout. And you feel kind of bad for the people who probably were liked by a lot of the voters, but they had to choose one. So they chose, somebody who's, I think, has been doing a fine job, but it's tough to run for office. So it's nice to get a little bit of support. And Matthew, you had your hand up. I don't know if you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just a remark. I don't know how much I'm speaking to the choir here, but it's really interesting to me that the dividing line for them between choosing instant runoff voting and approval voting was how many candidates were in the election. Because instant runoff voting has this property where the way that the winner selection algorithm works, the number of permutations on a ballot basically grows geometrically the more candidates you add to an election. So all these different election processes get more and more complicated, require more and more computing power, more labor, all sorts of things, just as you keep adding candidates. So it's really interesting to me to hear that that was kind of the dividing line for them.
Yeah, yeah, just to speak to that more, I mean, it was specifically the human computing power. They thought that so one other major consideration, which was already mentioned, is the goal here was to invite 70,000 voters to participate in this election. And so they couldn't really do multiple rounds of they could do instant runoff voting, but not multiple rounds of balloting. And so the reality is, when you're interacting with tens of thousands of people, it's going to be a very shallow interaction. And so they were very concerned that being asked to rank 5 candidates it just gives people a headache. It's just too much. Being asked to rank 3 candidates, okay, I can do that. And approval among 3 candidates isn't that interesting, if we're being honest, as someone who loves approval voting. And so I thought that was a really nice consideration.
Well, just one additional comment on that. Wait, I lost my train of thought. Okay, I forgot. Never mind.
Worse
Never
than
mind.
geometric. You said geometric, but I think it's exponential because your first choice you have 5, and then your next choice you have 4, and then your next choice you have 3 and 2.
Well,
So it's factorial. Sorry.
Permutations grows by the power of what's it called? When you do 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5.
Yes, factorial.
Factorial. Yeah,
which is
factorial.
crazy time complexity. I mean that was insanely fast.
Yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say, so never mind.
Yeah. And so they ended up approval voting ended up happening. Yeah, Deborah.
Oh, I just wanted you to finish your story. Tell us how it went and how
Totally. So
how it worked.
Just not to ruin the ending, not to take all the suspense away, but it went incredibly well. It went super well. I mean, if there were a few hiccups here and there, but overall, I'd say 99% of people I think are happy with it. So I'll continue. So there were 3 organizations.
Matthew remembers what he was going to ask it.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. What did you make so when you were considering instant runoff voting here, were you making a distinction between so-called exhausted ballots and non-exhausted ballot? An exhausted ballot is when someone decides not to rank all the candidates in an election. They just ranked a certain subset of them. Did you make a distinction between what counted as a valid ballot and what didn't? Were you allowing people to rank a limited subset of candidates?
Yeah.
Your consideration.
Correct. If people only wanted to rank 3, that would be totally fine. But I actually do want to clarify, just to be totally clear, it was not my decision of which voting method was used. Our organization is as the voting vendor technology provider, and so whatever they wanted to do, we were going to go with that. I had opinions. I made recommendations, but I believe it wouldn't have been IRV specifically. I would have been pretty vocal. It would have been one of the better ranked choice voting algorithms, like Ranked Robin. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
Wow.
IRV's, I don't know if people know this, but IRV is actually broken. It's unfortunate. It would be great if it worked, but it has a lot of problems. And for this vote, it was all digital, and so we can do better voting methods. So, yeah.
I thought weren't you allowed to turn in a paper ballot if you needed to?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's an interesting piece of this as well. I'll just skip around because why not? So there were paper ballots, but for everyone that submitted an in-person paper ballot, there were 50 digital ballots, which, as somebody that makes digital voting software, was very flattering. I liked that. So everyone had the option to vote digitally, but sorry, to vote digitally or in person, but there was a very strong preference for voting from home from your phone or computer or what have you, 50 to 1, which is pretty remarkable.
Either that or a lot of hacking. Sorry, I had to throw that in.
No. So great point. Another excellent point. So there's a lot of verifiability at play. We've been working on so Civ, our organization, it's an acronym. It stands for Secure Internet Voting. And we named it that in contrast to insecure internet voting. And as the goal of our organization is to make voting more accessible, but also while doing it safely. There are a lot of very real risks at play in any digital system, but especially elections, because you have strong one person, one vote requirements, and votes can be tampered with. And then you have the really strong privacy requirements, which make all the other problems even harder. And so we have been spending many years working with many experts, building on top of a lot of academic work to create verifiable digital voting. And so I'm gonna get into that as well. But the full voter roll is auditable. Every last vote is auditable. Oh, this Twitter thing is jumping around way too much. But anyway, so let me continue on with the setup a little bit, if that's okay. So the trifecta, the party side of things, the approval side of things, and the digital side of things. And so it was a 70,000 person district. We have a map of it here if you're curious. It's a very rural area west of Salt Lake City. These locations are like hour-long drives between each other just to get around the district. So pretty spread out for whatever that's worth. So every voter got mailed an invitation. I'm just gonna go with these highlights because we just wrote this a few days ago and it seems to be capturing the story relatively well. So the results were just announced. It went successfully, which we're very happy to say. This woman named Emily Buss was the winner, and she's now the senator-elect. There was a lot of fear, actually. This was a major boogeyman in the background that the Republican Party was going to try to steal this appointment. The way the rule is written is the party gets to decide the appointment, exactly as was mentioned earlier. But there was some allegations that maybe because Thatcher had been originally elected as a Republican, does that mean, even though he changed parties, how does that, it wasn't 100% spelled out. But basically, part of the thinking was because the vote was open to all voters, it would have looked really bad politically to then have the Republican Party take it away from all voters. If it had been just the Forward Party gets to inclusively insiders pick the replacement, there probably would have been a lot more of a fight there. So that was an interesting element. But so, any questions on that, or should I continue? But so as of yet, the state legislature and the state Senate president and all the Republican Party has acknowledged her as the winner. So that particular aspect of the challenge has now moved on. It seems like we're in the clear so far. So the really exciting thing is this was a big election. There were 70,000 people invited to participate. And really interesting note about that, this was not a taxpayer-funded election, but it still was trying to include 70,000 people, which is a challenge. It turns out it's just costs a lot of money, and you need a lot of volunteers, and it's a lot of work in order to collect 70,000 people's choices. Just to give a tiny bit of context, there's been some estimates from the Brennan Center for Justice that if you add up all the departments of elections across the country, it works out to, on average, about $20 per registered voter in the US per year to hold elections. $4 billion nationwide for a country of 200 million voters. This was a district of 70,000 people. The Forward Party is a small, young party. It does not have a ton of resources. And so that was, from day one, a big concern was how can we actually carry this out effectively?
How did they raise the money? Or
so private donors that were especially very excited about approval voting was a big piece of it. There was some support from the National Forward Party as well, and just yeah, private donors. And we did a lot of things to keep the costs way down. We're going to publish a report in a few days, but I think it's going to come out to something like $30,000 total cost to run this entire vote. Where they had talked to the local county. They had asked, it's 3 counties are in the district, and so they'd asked them, can you add our ballot question to your existing ballot that's already being sent out to all the voters? And they had gotten quotes for, I think it was $2.50 per voter to add their question to every ballot. So that would have been about $200,000, $160,000.
What is this other question?
Who should be the replacement? Who should fill this seat?
Oh, that's the only question. Okay.
Like this past November, we had our November 2025 general election, so it had the normal ballot. And so one option that they were considering was, can we work with the existing counties to include our question on there? The cost was one factor that made that a challenge. They also didn't have great support for alternative voting methods because they're under all their restrictions. They also wanted to do all sorts of things about providing information on the candidates that the counties weren't going to give them custom ballots around, and a number of other things. So just to put some context of making that part happen. So yeah, 70,000 voters. And so what ended up happening was we sent letters, which I can pull up an example of what those looked like. So every house in the district received a letter that looked like this on the outside. You guys can still see my screen. And then
i.e. a postcard, or I'm sorry.
No, a sealed envelope. This is the outside of the envelope. And then this is the front of the letter. And the reverse of the letter with some Q&A. And all this is available on the website as well. I can send the link to this.
I gathered there was a little glitch, which was if there were more than 4 voters in the household, they only got 4 codes.
Yeah, it was. So what ended up happening, it's quite frustrating. There was a separate company that we designed all the letters. We worked with the Forward Party to design and print all the letters. And one piece that you're alluding to there is the front of the letter had this unique voter code for every voter in the house. And so if there were multiple, this was one of the major cost savings things that we were able to do. Instead of sending one letter per voter, we combined them into 3 codes per letter. So if there were up to 3 voters in the house, they got 1 letter. If there were up to 6 voters in the house, they got 2 letters. There are a few houses with, I think one house even had 11 voters in it. So you can imagine that. There was a miscommunication between our side of things and the local print shop that actually printed. They have the equipment to print out all these letters and send all these out, which is that they deduplicated all the addresses that the letters were being sent to, which itself is a reasonable thing to do. The major issue that we're quite frustrated by is that they didn't tell us that they were doing it, and we didn't find out that they did it until 2 days before the election was supposed to end, which was very frustrating. And so every house still got a letter, but some houses were supposed to get 2 letters or even 3 letters. So about 1/8 of the letters did not end up getting sent out is the estimate. It was 33,000 were supposed to go out and only 30,000 ended up going out, something to that extent. The good news is we had lots of provisional other backup methods, even if you didn't have your letter, if you were at work, we had other methods that I can get into in a bit. So we hope we were able to work around that problem. Extremely frustrating. We know how to avoid it next time. But that is absolutely one piece of friction that came up in the process.
I am so impressed that you had a backup plan. You can't ever plan for everything. They say plans are useless, but planning is essential. So You had a backup plan, and so you went to the backup plan. Great.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
does this mean anything? The vote by Thursday, you've got a check, and an X. Is it
That
just graph?
does not mean anything
Okay.
semantic. That was version 1, we were told doesn't have enough graphics. It needs to look more votey. We said, what looks votey? And they said check marks. Why don't you add check marks? And since there's approval voting, we put 2 check marks on it, and that's what it means. That's an interesting question. I wonder if that confused other people. I mean, all of this was really an exercise, in addition to so many other things that we're juggling, is how can we communicate this pretty involved process to a wide audience that doesn't have a lot of time, that doesn't have a lot of attention to deal with this. And that was one of the many reasons why I think approval voting was a great choice, because it is so simple. Yeah, Matthew.
So, am I correct in understanding that this requires a smartphone in order to vote?
No.
No.
You can
People
go,
just go to like the website and put their information in and whatever.
Correct.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So you can go to it's either option. You can scan the QR code from your phone and be on the ballot page in a few seconds, or you can go on a computer or laptop. You can go to the website. I think the Vote Now button has now been removed since we posted the results, but it used to say right here, Vote Now, and that would take you to this page, which you could type in your code, or you could have access to the provisional ballot, or we had information about the in-person options as well. Lots of questions. Oh, and we had pictures of where to find your code on the ballot.
My question was, is this letter the only information that they're getting about approval voting?
I hope not. There were lots of local news articles. I think the 11 Chooses website they used to have a bunch of highlights about it, but the local news covered it very extensively, which was great. This was when it was first announced, and then when they had the candidates posted, there was a whole nother news cycle, and then once the voting started, there was a whole nother voting cycle. And so I certainly hope not. There was also on the back, we had a whole thing all about approval voting, and we invited people to go to the Center for Election Science website. The candidates also talked about it. There was also a debate, a forum that was hosted by the local League of Women Voters, which is wonderful. They were a great collaborator on this. Yeah, so
It's
hope not,
also
but
it's also hard to mess up an approval voting ballot. So you need less voter education for it.
here's what the actual ballot, the digital ballot itself looked like. You have the candidates and you can check their names and you can learn about them. And there were more instructions on the ballot itself as well. Maybe this actually answers your question. There were also approval voting instructions directly on the ballot itself as well.
Did you rotate the candidates so
Yeah,
you didn't have
every
a top
time the
line?
page refreshes, the order was randomized. So,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, which we also did for the in-person ballots, interestingly, as well, which
Hmm.
was people appreciated.
So my other question is, how do you keep somebody in the household from voting somebody else's ballot?
Great question. So we had an additional, after you would press submit your vote, you got taken to the next page, which was confirm your year of birth, which is if you're in the same household. That was not really expected to defend against stolen votes within the same household. Because the assumption was people in the household would probably know each other's year of birth. That was more meant to defend against your letter gets delivered to the wrong house, or some stranger takes your letter, or things like that. So maybe that doesn't answer your question all that well. One of the big defenses, I mean, part of our thinking is that we wanted to relatively match vote by mail levels of auth, which is similar, whoever has access to the mailbox, with one additional requirement, which is the signatures. You have to draw your signature on your vote by mail ballot. We have software set up to collect voter drawn signatures, just like on a Square terminal, you can draw your signature. The major issue was that we didn't have the canonical record of how people's signatures are supposed to look like, and so we didn't have anything to match it against. And so we did have a lot of debate if we wanted to add that or not. But for now, we ended up deciding not to add that into the flow. But if anyone's vote goes missing, but the other major defense, you have to have access to the mailbox, you have to have the signature, and then the other person that wants to vote has to not try to also cast their own vote or notice that their vote goes missing. One thing that's nice about the way that our voting process works is any ballots that get submitted that have an issue can be remediated one by one. They're all kind of in a provisional state. And so we can say, hey, wait, there were 2 from this person. Let's investigate what's going on here and fix problems even after the fact. So now we're in a challenge period. The other thing is that we have there's a lot of auditing possible. And if I can pull that up. So after the results are announced, now we are currently in the challenge period. And so any of the unhappy voters or unhappy supporters of the candidates is part of our whole philosophy of what we're building here is that the election infrastructure is designed in such a way that even if the worst possible actors are running it, you can see it's tamper evident. You can see whether the results were fair or cheated or not, or tampered with or not. And so one piece of that is the voter roll. And so what that would look like in this specific case is you look at the list of who voted. We've already committed to the list of who voted, and you roll a random dice, and you say, okay, I rolled number 937, and then you actually go call up that voter, or you knock on their door and you say, hey, did you actually vote in this election? And this particular type of sampling is very, very efficient. There are other sampling methods where you are taking subsets of all the votes, but this method is extremely efficient. And so you only have to do a very small number of those. And depending on your election difference, you can detect. It's a similar philosophy as with risk limiting audits, where you can detect with arbitrary level of confidence whether there were enough compromises to flip the election results. So we are now in this period. As of yet, there's been a very minor challenge. There was one fear that someone went around stealing all the mail ballots. And so we did do an analysis on all the IP addresses that submitted votes and how many did any single IP address submit 50 votes or 100 votes was a concern, and it looked totally fine. I have the results somewhere, but we're going to publish it soon. Sorry if that was too much information.
This
Yes,
is
Matthew?
great.
Yeah, we were excited about it. Yeah, Matthew?
So later I'm going to go through like all the technical details because I'm really interested in how SIV set up this whole internet voting schema. But for now, I'm going to ask a provocative question that I hope isn't too much of a tangent. Are you familiar with the GNU Free E-Democracy Project? You ever heard of that?
Sadly, I'm not. I'm very familiar with GNU operating kernel and operating system, but not the Free Democracy Project specifically.
They had this thing called the Free E-Democracy Project that was from it was like 2001, 2002 or something. And the lead developer, he worked on it for like 3 or 4 years, and then he gave up and he wrote this detailed article breaking down why he gave up. And basically his conclusion was that he couldn't reconcile the 2 fundamental concerns with an internet voting system, which is protecting anonymity, the private ballot, the secret ballot, and simultaneously having a really secure, reliable system. And I'm just wondering, well, what are your thoughts on that? How did you manage to reconcile these really, really difficult obstacles?
Yeah, this is you've opened a large can of worms here. I apologize for everyone else. So yeah, these are fundamentally very hard problems. And so we call our platform SIV for short, Secure Internet Voting. And so the obvious question that leads into is, what does secure mean? Because it kind of is like good. It can, it's like anyone can apply that to anything. It's a bit of a matter of perspective. It wasn't just for context, as a clearly technical person, it's inspired by HTTPS, which actually stands for Secure Sockets Layer, but a lot of people think of it as HTTP with security. That's kind of how we're inspired by it as well. But specifically in an election context, we say that an election needs these 3 properties: one person, one vote. You need to know who your voters are. That's the first chronological issue with an election is this is your set of voters. And then this is chronologically in terms of the time of voting, although usually lately we've been presenting it more this direction. People care. Most people do not think about privacy. I am a very privacy conscious person, but I hate to say it, but a lot of people are not. They, yeah, most people don't even think about the privacy context. A lot of people think that everything they do is known by everyone, including in paper voting for a lot of reasons, and we could get into that. But so the thing that I think a lot of people care about is that the tally did not get changed and the way you voted actually got cast and counted the way you intended. And then of course the other piece is private voting, and that gets into a whole depth of
Yeah, you don't need to go into all the details. I'm sure they'll bore everyone else here. I'm happy to read that you subjected yourselves to the scrutiny of DEF CON, the annual DEF CON conferences. I'm seeing that on your website.
Fun. Yeah, we went back again this past year as well. That was 2 years ago. Yeah, the first time they ever had any voting system come willingly, and specifically an internet voting system as well. That's been a whole really fun process, and we're excited to go back again next year. It's an amazing place if people aren't familiar with it. Yeah, so many questions.
So on this topic, I think I'm going to let Neil go first ahead of me, and then I have a question after, because it looks like
I'm sad that I'm going to have to leave in a couple minutes. But as I posted in the chat, first of all, I agree entirely with Matthew's concerns, and the league in Colorado has deep concerns about online voting, and there's you've done a lot of good things in that realm, but it's an even more challenging realm than that. But
it's a very hard problem. We're not denying that.
Open source code to do this, and first glance, it seems like yours is proprietary.
Good question. So it's to get technical, it's source available. I don't know if you're familiar with the difference. It's
sure
a frustrating thing. It is not freely licensed. The license is proprietary, but all the source code is public. We don't necessarily always link to it, but the DEF CON page is all linked to it. And so the basic philosophy there is the reality is the source code that we publish, we can't prove that the source code that we publish is what is actually running on our servers. So publishing the source code is helpful for catching accidents, but it is insufficient for catching malice. We need stronger levels of verifiability for intentional deception. But nonetheless, we do publish all the source code, and we don't we do not freely license it for commercial use case or government use case because we need it to be sustainable. I'm happy to discuss that more with you. That's been a long back and forth process. I don't know if you have strong opinions about that as well. But definitely all the source code is available. And then you also
versus the Tusk.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings. We're recorded right now, so I have to be careful with what I'm going to say.
I can give you each other's email addresses or phone numbers or something.
Yeah.
And you two could talk.
The short answer is I think Tusk's heart is in the right place. I think his execution is falling short in a number of ways. Specifically when it comes to security issues, his background is on the political side of things. I think he's very good on a lot of the political side of things. I think he's really struggled for a decade now. Before he did all the new source code that has gone through some iterations, he was working with the Votes VOATZ group and some of the other ones that just have really questionable design decisions. And I think it's a tricky thing. We've tried to work with him a bunch of times. Unfortunately, it hasn't gone as well as I think anybody hopes. But I don't really know what to say exactly. I've done deep dives on their stuff. We've written up some stuff about it. I think it's still falling short in terms of malware, coercion. That verifiability is way too hard to use. It has a lot of problems. Even that's just not even getting to malware problems, which it doesn't even begin to address. But it's starting to get better. I mean, it's better than it was 7 years ago, so it's making progress, but in a weird direction. And I think his overall approach to the security, his posture towards the security community has been very counterproductive, has made things drastically more difficult for people that want to actually make secure voting software. So I'm sad by the situation.
It certainly used to be the case. They're working with free and fair
Yeah.
now, which is an incredible step up. So anyway, yeah, we'll talk
Agreed.
some other time.
Agreed. They've gotten better in the last year, although it's been a journey to get to there too.
The League of Women Voters of Colorado has been asked to weigh in on our opinions on the Tusk mobile voting project. So just FYI.
Yeah.
Is it time for my question?
Please, yeah.
So I was a little sad to see the voter turnout. And
Yeah.
what has been, so it was less than 2% of registered voters turned out. And what have people been saying about that low turnout?
Yeah, it's a little hard to say because, we don't know what it is exactly. One, I'll say this, the Forward Party members had quite high expectations for the turnout. I think they were expecting like 20,000 votes or something like that is what they're really hoping for. I would have been happy with 5,000. I think 5,000 would have been great. It just for anyone that's not aware, it ended up being 1325, 1,300, maybe 1324. So it was, yeah, between 1 and 2% basically of the 70,000 voting body. There's a whole bunch of explanations for why that might be. I think combination of factors. The most, to me, the most compelling are first and foremost, most people don't know their state legislator in the first place. It's not a really involved process. I ran for my state legislature in 2018 for the assembly. And as part of that process, I had to get signatures, nominating signatures to get on the ballot. And so I walked around my neighborhood. This is in San Francisco. And I had to get 50 signatures. And I asked every single person, what do you think of the incumbent? And 0 out of 50 people knew his name out of my samples out of 50. And he had been reelected 4 times. He had been in office for 8 years, 2-year terms. And he was the chair of the state budget committee, which that year was a $190 billion annual budget. And this was the chair, and 0 out of 50 of his random constituents that I bumped into on the street knew his name.
When you said his name, did they say, "Oh, that rings a bell"?
About 1 in 5, maybe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, people, what people care about is the letter next to the name. He has a
Right.
D next to his name.
Right.
I live in San Francisco, 90% Democrat.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah. And then the some other issues. So this is like a really frustrating issue, but a lot of people, we flew into Salt Lake City to help administer the election. And so I was talking on the plane with a random Salt Lake City resident, and she cared so much about this. She'd be well welcomed in this group, I think. And she was under the impression that the vote was only for Forward Party members. And I think a lot of people seem to have that impression that the vote was only for Forward Party members for some reason, even though all the headlines everywhere said it's open to everybody, everyone can get involved. Somehow, like the press article said the Forward Party's doing this, the Forward Party picks, and no, the Forward Party doesn't have a huge amount of branding. That was part of the inspiration for this whole thing in the first place, was like show people here are better ways to do things. So it's a little bit hard to say how much of a factor that was, but it seems like that might have been a bit of a factor.
Do you know what the turnout was among Forward Party members? Was it 80%? Was it?
I would speculate that it was
95?
95% because there's
Okay.
only like 5 of them in the district.
Okay.
I mean, it's I think there's like
Well, then it would be
250
80% or
statewide.
100%.
Right, correct. Yeah, good point. I don't know that exact number. We didn't even look up party registration status on people who voted. Some other explanations. So the candidates were all basically unknown, very relatively new, didn't have a lot of name recognition. Another factor at play is none of the candidates were very controversial. There wasn't a villain. There wasn't like a lot of clickbait or outrage or like, oh, we need to stop X. and I hate to say it, but I think that is a lot of people's experience with politics is like we're more motivated to vote against people than necessarily to vote for people, even though the whole point of approval voting is to get away from that.
So a lot of this is open, very transparent. So Neil often looks at cast vote records and does analysis. So he could take these are all the CVRs and he could do whatever analysis he wants to do, I'm guessing, right?
We have a specific one has already been made for the approval voting of like the anyone but analysis and the pairwise, like if you vote for this
Great.
person, did you also vote for this person?
Great.
No, the thing to check would be the cryptographic details, which you presumably make available.
We're more that we by all means share your request, and if we can, we would love to make it available. We just don't want to share obviously private vote information, which we don't have. And then
Is the bulletin board not still alive with
it is alive, but I took it down. I can share it with you. We have to restore it. There was a annoying cost reason that we took it down because we hadn't optimized something in the right way. And so we temporarily disabled it. You're the first person to ask for it. We have it all backed up. I can 100% share it with you. And we want to optimize it so we never have to take it down again. But
David, could I start sharing and show the results unless you want to do that?
yeah.
And
These results you have the ones from the 11 chooses page.
Yeah.
Top as well.
Or it's on, yeah, that one. So I would argue that on the right-hand column where it says approval percentage, it says approvals divided by votes cast. I think that should be ballots cast. And you can see below it says ballots cast, and then under it says 1,324. So it's not votes cast, it's 1,324 approvals. I mean, ballots
Right.
cast. Yeah.
I'm disavowing responsibility for that mistake. I did not make this graphic.
Yeah. Okay.
But yes, you're exactly 100% right.
We've been trying to get the Colorado Secretary of State to report Mark Parsons and Neil McBurnan in particular. They've been interviewed on the radio, and to get the multi-winner plurality contests recorded as percent support as a percent of the ballots, basically, instead of percent of the total vote, which is crazy. Anyway.
Yeah. We usually say this is the approvals for 47% of the electorate.
Yeah, approved.
for
Yeah.
Emily.
Yeah. So Matthew has a question, and then we actually have one more topic, which we can also hold over till next month if we want to. But Matthew wanted you to remark a little bit more on the donor money that made this successful.
Any more specific question there?
Well, yeah. So would this have happened at all without a lot of donor money? Can you say anything about the types of donors, maybe?
Yeah.
Still, what I'm really interested in is, does it feel like we're going to have to wait for some benevolent millionaire to come in and give us alternative voting methods? That's what I want to know.
That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, I do think it takes well-resourced people to get things off the ground, to kind of seed things in a lot of ways. But just to be clear, I don't know exactly. I don't want to, it's not my thing to share, although I don't think it's private information. But it was the high level detail is that it's many of the people that also support the Center for Election Science were very excited about supporting this election. I don't know if that helps answer.
Yeah, that isn't. So I think one of the things I'm getting at here, one of the things I'm thinking of actually is, I think one of the reasons that ranked choice voting, instant runoff voting has been so popular the past 20, 30 years is because this one organization, FairVote, is just really well funded. And they've been around for a long time. They've got all the money. They can show up wherever they want to. And that's why this instant runoff voting has managed to capture the public consciousness so much.
Totally. Yeah, and they had a 20-year head start and they have a lot of they have a lot of good allyship. I mean there was a whole saga about that. There was a little window there where it looked like the election might not be able to happen, except that Fair Vote offered to donate money to switch it to instant runoff voting or some sort of ranked choice voting
That's in
thing.
Seattle.
But this is for Utah specifically, I'm saying.
Okay, but it also
Yeah.
happened in
Yeah,
Seattle.
exactly. Yeah, there was a lot of bad blood going back and forth. I tried to mediate it. I was excited. I don't know if many people or other people are excited about this, but there are some statistical techniques that can be used where instead of reaching out to all 70,000 voters, we could have reached out to a smaller subset. And it turns out the way the sampling math works is it's pretty wild. This is a calculator that we made to show it. So if you had a 70,000 person subset and you get random results among these are various candidates, these are just random results coming up. And this is just, you only sampled among 147 people. It's like you sample among 1,000 people. And in your sample, one person was getting 36%. If you properly randomly sampled them, the statistical math implies it's
So,
not literally 100.0. It should be like
Geary,
99.999.
Sam, Geary.
Yeah.
Wonderful. You can hang out with these folks.
Neil, are you talking to us?
It's been a while.
Okay.
Okay. Nice. So yeah, this was another backup plan if we weren't able to fund all the mailers that we were looking into. It was definitely not ideal for a whole bunch of reasons, but this is one consideration. There's also this movement called election by jury, where there was some talk of actually polling in voters for a more like a whole presentation, but they would be randomly sampled, sort of like sortition, but they wouldn't be deciding on the positions. They would specifically be deciding on which candidate. And there's some pretty cool math that you only need about 50 randomly sampled voters and you get like 99% accuracy of what the entire electorate would have done. But arguably much better because the electors, the jury members would have much more time to devote and they could be paid for their time to do this. And so it can be a high information decision. So there was some interest in that as well.
So they would have picked the final candidate, the final winner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Using secret voting with live presentations, and there could be like expert witnesses called on the candidates, like position on some of the positions, and they could call like support character witnesses. There's a whole thing about election by jury.
Citizen assemblies, sometimes they're called.
Well, so that's specifically for a policy.
Yeah, but
This
I
is
mean, it's the
specifically
same
for
idea.
exact same idea, but
Yeah.
specifically for electing representatives.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, there's been some interesting work on it just in the last few years.
So back to the money question, if I may.
Yeah.
So one option, because the instant runoff voting and the single transferable vote are so expensive, is to do approval voting, which is what Forward Party decided to do. Another thing is Lee Drutman, for instance, wrote a book called
The Business of America is Lobbying.
No, Breaking the Two-Party Doom Loop,
Mm.
or something about the two-party doom loop. And he argued for both the single winner and the proportional type of RCV, but he has now come around to advocating for party list in partisan elections, because that's very easy to count, right? And you get proportionality and in a partisan election, that's going to be the main label upon which people make choices, as you pointed out in San Francisco. However, for a nonpartisan contest, multi-winner or an elected body, single transferable vote is the only one that's authorized in Colorado statute. And we're trying to get enabling legislation for that, as we were going to talk about next. So actually, I would like to have a few minutes to say a little bit more, if I may, about what's happening in Colorado. Sue has joined us. Welcome, Sue. Sue, remind us, if you would, you were a state legislator, is that correct?
Yes,
And it was House or Senate?
I was in the House from 2009 to 2017.
Okay. Always happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm also an AAUW.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and um, talk a little bit about the, whoops. Do you see my screen now? The results of the Utah election. The second thing on the agenda for today, and we don't have very much time, is just to give you an update on proportional ranked voting and enabling legislation for it. So the State League is meeting with legislators and lobbyists. We met with a legislator today. We met with a lobbyist last week, and the goal is to get county clerks to conduct the proportional ranked voting elections for municipalities and special districts in a coordinated election. So we've come up with 4 legislative options. One is the Secretary of State writes the rules. We don't actually have to have a legislation telling them to do that. They could just write them, but they have not been very proactive in doing that. We could incorporate a mandate for them to write the rules in an elections cleanup bill. This is like a 50, 60, 90, 100 page bill that happens almost every year. There could be a standalone bill, but every legislator only gets 5 guaranteed bills. So they might not want to use one of their 5 bills for an election change or a rules change, I should say. And then this is something that came up today is we could ask for a formal resolution in the state legislature calling on the Secretary of State to fulfill its statutory obligations. And the reason these words are used is because it turns out maybe we don't really need enabling legislation because there is already a mandate for the Secretary of State to write rules. It's in 1-7-1004 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. It has been in the statute since 2008, and the next slide shows the language. Also, another reason to support this enabling legislation is that the Colorado Voting Rights Act, which passed last year, very important bill, you can tell because it's bill number 1 in the Senate. That act supports proportional voting methods, and enabling legislation just enables jurisdictions to adopt PRV and have the county clerks run it. It doesn't require any jurisdictions to adopt proportional ranked voting. So here's what the statute says. The 2 kinds of ranked voting, the single winner and the proportional multi-winner, are in 1-7-1003. So this is the very next section. It says, the Secretary of State shall adopt rules consistent with the previous section on the conduct of elections using ranked voting methods. The rules shall prescribe the methods and procedures for tabulating, auditing, and reporting results using a ranked voting method. And then part 2 says the Secretary of State shall provide guidance and advice to the governing bodies, in this case it's municipalities and special districts, and to the designated election officials, that's like the city clerks and the county clerks. The county clerks run the election in a coordinated election. So they have to write the rules and they have to provide the guidance. So it's all there. I think that's the end of that one. Yeah. So I think we're starting to get some traction on this, and I wanted to tell you all that news. And I think I'm gonna stop sharing right now because I don't want to keep people over. I need to go to sleep tonight. I see there's some things in the chat. Idaho and ranked voting is in the chat. It's interesting, Betsy, that in Idaho, people supported the all candidate primaries, but they didn't support the instant runoff voting. I think in Colorado, it was probably the reverse. They were very concerned about the all candidate primaries. But what happened in Alaska is it's a top 4 election, and 4 people move on. And the second time they ran the election, the second election cycle, they didn't even have more than 4 candidates usually. So you didn't need to vote in the primary because all 4 were going to advance to in most or all of the contests, all 4 were going to advance. So yeah, interesting. Wow. Matthew, I don't know if you all read, Wyoming has banned the use of all alternative voting methods last year.
Yeah, it was very demoralizing.
So Matthew, the Secretary of State in Colorado uses single transferable vote.
Oh, that's good to hear.
The statute says proportional, and then it says multi-winner, use single transferable vote. The statutes, I mean, I think if you had to say which one term do they use, it ends up being single transferable vote, but they, the title says proportional voting or other things. So it's, yeah.
Our state legislature in Wyoming, it's been a source of frustration for me that just getting them to use precise language on this subject. Everyone just wants to say ranked choice voting, and you got to tell them there's like scores of different ways you can do a ranked choice ballot, right?
Have you seen our article about what is ranked choice voting?
No.
I'm gonna put it in the chat. And the bad Utah version is, the link doesn't work, but I can send you a link that does work for it. So yeah, take a look at that. I know that it was very enlightening to one elections director of a big municipality here in Boulder, in Colorado, not Boulder, but in Colorado. So I feel like we did a good job educating there. So it is 7 o'clock.
I have one just fun anecdote on that. So we did run some ranked choice voting elections for Utah, other ones before this as well. And one frustrating thing that no one could ever clarify for me is when you have, who do you eliminate when you have ties in the last place, right? When you're doing the elimination round. And it's rather ambiguous in almost all the rules anywhere. And
yeah, you've got to outline it ahead of time or you're in big trouble.
I know what Cambridge does.
What is that?
Cambridge looks at the previous round, and whoever was higher in the previous round gets to advance.
Yeah, you could eliminate all of them. You could do something alphabetically. So it turns out what the bylaws in Utah say is you flip a coin, which drives me crazy because the whole way our system is designed, it makes your elections non-deterministic. Every time you run your election, which is like, what is going on here? So
don't they do that in San Francisco too?
They very well might. I can't deny that they do it. San
Francisco as well.
Yeah, Oakland across the bay had an election spoiled by, I think it was like you were talking about before, the exhausted, not spoiled, but they called the wrong winner because they didn't handle people leaving the first choice blank, and the software, they didn't configure it right. Anyway, good old IRV.
So I don't want to leave without saying, Barb, do you want to say anything? Lori, Sue, you haven't been here that long, I think, but we are going to end this meeting pretty soon and love to.
I don't have a lot to add. I'm just in learning mode and really excited to learn more about this, actually. It's just one of those things where we've got to make some changes, and I'm super excited. So David, thank you for your overview of all that. I'm very kind of new to this, recently retired, and just want to, get more involved in it. So that's all I have to say, but thank you all so much.
Thanks for coming. Hope you come again.
Yeah, I want to. So thanks.
Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and end if nobody has anything.
I'll stop the
Oh,
record.
wait. Sue says her primary concern is dark money and how it might influence TCV. Is that the convicted? No, I don't know what.
RCV says under.
Oh, RCV. Okay. Oh, yeah, it's corrected. That was one of the talking points in Prop 131. And for me, it's an open question. I don't know. There's already dark money. I don't know how it's going to necessarily change. If we have proportional representation, dark money plays a much smaller influence. And I would have loved to have seen Prop 131 use proportional representation for elections. And I don't think Colorado is ready for a single transferable vote, but party list would be easy to do.
One thing that we have learned is that the internal party elections seem to be a much more fertile ground for pushing new voting methods because they're not legally bound. They have so much flexibility, and it can actually get people out of spoiler paradoxes. There actually are often a lot of candidates, and so these really shine. And so I'm really excited about helping the parties themselves be less subject to spoiler effects and paradoxes because of these better social choice tools.
Yeah. We also have an elections task force, and they do more on election security and on campaign finance, maybe. We focus mostly on alternative voting methods, ballot access, maybe some things like that, like how you get more candidates on the ballot, things like that. If you want more candidates on the ballot, voter turnout. Does a voting method encourage voter turnout? Anyway, so thanks everybody for coming. And I love meeting with this group. Thanks so much, David, for coming. This was great having you here. So
yeah, thank you for inviting me.
So let's go ahead and stop the recording.